Hello, my name is Lidya Radin, and this is part 2 of a video that I'm dedicating to students on the Columbia University campus. And to recap, I wanted to warn students on the campus about Janice Bennett. She's a clinical psychologist who works in Lerner Hall. I wanted to warn Columbia students about Dan Rizal. He's an attorney that teaches at Columbia's law school. And I wanted to warn Columbia students about John Scarfone. He's associate general counsel at my medical school, and I'm told that he's a regular visitor to the Columbia campus. These three individuals, Janice Bennett, Dan Rizal, John Scarfone, today are engaged in federal student loan fraud against me. They are defrauding state and federal taxpayers, but even more than that, they are involved in civil rights violations that are beyond the pale. They claim that students in medical school at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine get fair hearings before they're expelled. That's not true. So we're required as medical students to stand out in the hall while in a meeting room our professors give false unsworn testimony against us. So I came to the Columbia campus and I reported this to purportedly responsible people. Sally Chapman over at the chemistry department at Barnard College, Dean Peter Ahn, who happens to be the dean of my school, the School of General Studies, Dr. Deborah Moshowitz, who's a pre-med advisor, Dr. Leonard, who's an advisor over at the engineering school. I went to Janice Bennett's boss, Dr. Samuel Seward. I actually worked my way up to the president of Columbia University, Lee Bollinger, and I said, President Bollinger, could we make a hearing procedure for medical students? Because what I discovered after talking to the the New York State Attorney General's office, this is Andrew Cuomo's office. I had gone to a hearing in May of 2007. Congressman Miller had a hearing with Margaret Spellings at a public hearing in Washington that I had attended, and I approached Margaret Spellings and tried to resolve these federal student loan issues. Couldn't get anywhere. I approached Congressman Miller, couldn't get anywhere. Finally, Congressman Miller's office referred me to New York State Attorney General's office, Andrew Cuomo's office, and I was put in touch with Ben Roski, a highly placed attorney, and Mel Goldberg. Mel Goldberg, also a highly placed attorney, asked me some really good questions, and I didn't have the answers for them. He asked me what the hearing procedures were at the other medical schools in the state of New York, and I didn't know how to answer him. So for 3 days, I went out in the field, and I got the answers to Mel Goldberg's questions, and they scared the hell out of me. Because what I learned was that all hearing procedures at all medical schools in the state of New York are fatally flawed. And medical students do not get fair hearings. And I reported back in good faith to Mel Goldberg, thinking that he would take, positive corrective action, positive progressive action. He didn't. Instead, he threatened. So I'm coming back to the Columbia University campus, and I'm telling Columbia students what nobody else will tell you, and I wish someone had told me. I wish some of the other victims of my medical school, John Pulcasi, Dr. Garg, AJP Garg, Heidi Weissman, I can give you a list of victims. Had any of those victims gone out into the field and warned their undergraduate colleges that a very dangerous situation exists at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, a false accusation is enough to destroy an innocent person's life. So on the Columbia campus, you have Janice Bennett, Dan Rizal, John Scarfone. They lie to steal money from students, me and Mike Tyber. Janice Bennett, John Scarfone, Dan Rizal on the Columbia University campus. They engage in gross civil rights violations. I think even criminal civil rights violations, to railroad someone out of medical school, to subject them to life-altering events when they couldn't even be in the room to hear or address their accusers is unconscionable. And I worked my way up to Lee Bollinger. This is a law professor. President Lee Bollinger, I didn't go to him to ask. I think I must have begged at some point and said, could we here at Columbia University make a hearing procedure that fully comports with the spirit of the law and set an example of excellence for the world to follow? And the answer I got was no. You know why? Because the American Medical Association likes to control its subordinates through ignorance and fear, and that's unconscionable. So if you're a Columbia student, you need to know. The Columbia University Spectator will not protect you. Ben Cotton, editor-in-chief, will not report this. Your professors and deans will not report this. They will not take positive corrective action. I wanted to hear from them in one voice. We here on the Columbia University campus, we set an example of excellence to work for the world to follow, and they don't. So not only do you need to know that you've got unindicted co-conspirators in federal student loan fraud, Janice Bennett, Dan Rizal, John Scarfone, but on your campus you do not have professors and students of good conscience who will stand up and do right by you and me and every medical student in the state of New York. But you know who will? Other hardworking people at the Nassau County Civic Association and the Tea Party people and Councilman Rodriguez and his chief of staff, Angel Audi-Fred, and people and board members at PFLAG and Congressman Micah and Wiley Deck. These are people who work hard all day long and then find a little time, a little extra time in their day to fight the good fight to protect Columbia students and all medical students in the state of New York, because President Lee Bollinger will not, and it's a disgrace. Moreover, I'm going to be asking the international community to boycott Columbia University's World Leaders Forum, because there is no leadership to be found on the Columbia University campus. If there were leadership, President Lee Bollinger would have stood up by now and made a hearing procedure for medical students for other schools to follow. He will not. All hearing procedures at all schools are fatally flawed. There's never been a fair hearing for medical students in the state of New York since the dawn of time, and it's unconscionable. So, my next steps are to reach out to the international community and talk about gross human rights violations that have been going on for decades, and to ask the international community to boycott Columbia University's World Leaders Forum, because there is no world leadership going on in my alma mater. The only thing the World Leaders Forum does is they try to bring in world leaders, some of which are controversial, and then they try to get some cheap publicity for the university. So I'm going to challenge the Columbia University administration in this video. For God's sakes already, make a hearing procedure for medical school students that fully comports with the spirit of the law and sets an example of excellence for the world to follow. And hold Janice Bennett, Dan Rizal, and John Scarfone accountable for their criminal conduct in federal student loan fraud.